Hello, my name's Stuart, the unrepentant atheist. I hope that I hope that I had a glitch. I had a sound glitch. Unfortunately, I've had to restart this live stream. Hopefully, it will be picked up. And I seem to have sound now. I can tell. And I've actually unplugged all the microphones. I tried the external mic. I don't know why it didn't work, but there must be some problem there. I'm not really too sure what it is, but it seems to be working now. So hopefully, for those of you who are obviously tuning into this for the first time and not watching it live, I'm going to be talking about. Yeah, okay, thanks for that confirmation, Kalasia789. Yeah, I've dispensed with my external mic, and now I'm just using the mic that's built into the laptop. It's not ideal. It's not brilliant sound quality, but at least you can hear me. You can detect my words and hear what I'm saying, even if it's a bit echoey and the sound quality is not brilliant. It's better to have that than no sound at all, right? Okay, good. So let's hope that eventually others who were viewing when I had to unfortunately cut that live stream, will eventually find sound is not bad. Yeah, well, okay, well that's good anyway. The picture's not brilliant. I've got a good cam, but unfortunately it doesn't work well with artificial light. So that's not very good. But again, at least I think the main thing about my live streams is that you can hear what I'm saying and understand what I'm saying, even if the video isn't very good. So let's just talk now. Let's just talk now about what I'm going to be devoting this live stream to. I've come on early because I didn't do a live stream last week due to the fact I was attending to family business, but I'm going to be talking about that because in a way it relates to the whole topic of atheism and I don't know, life after death, dealing with life after death, dealing with bereavement as an atheist. How do you do that? Good evening, Paul. Thanks for joining us. So I'm going to be talking about a death that's happened in my family and me as an atheist, and obviously most of the people in my family that we've lost somebody. We are atheists. How we're dealing with it, etc. And I'm going to be talking about that and things that I've learned in the last week or so. I'm also going to be talking about some of the calls that came into the line in the week that I was away, plus also the show that went out on Sunday evening with Skeptics and Scoundrels and Matt Dillahunty. I've got some calls. I listened to all the calls. I thought it was quite a good show. Matt was on fairly good form. He did get angry in a few calls, of course, which is what you would expect. And I suppose that everybody got their money's worth. I'll be talking about that shortly. But first of all, let me just talk about why I was away last week. So I'm going to be talking about some of my family business, but keeping it as generic as I possibly can. And in fact, I'm probably going to delete this entire video in about 2 weeks because I'm going to be talking about fairly personal matters, and I probably don't want this video to remain online for more than about 2 weeks, so that most of my followers who actually catch up and can't watch the live stream see it, but then probably I'll just delete the video completely, mainly because I'm going to be talking about personal matters. But I think personal matters that you might find interesting, and I'm going to be relating it to the whole topic of atheism and my belief, for example, obviously, that when we die, there is absolutely nothing to look forward to. There's no afterlife. That's all nonsense. There's not even darkness. There's just it's just the end of existence for the individual, and that's it. We're here on this planet. We've got one life, and it's not even a case that the lights go out forever, because that implies that there's darkness. There's not even darkness. I think that when you go to sleep, if you dream, you've got some measure of you've got some kind of awareness. You haven't got awareness that you're dreaming, but there's something there. But when you're not dreaming, you've got absolutely zero. You've got no awareness of darkness. You've got no awareness of anything at all. And I think that probably death is like that, but there's absolutely no life behind it. You'll never wake up in that sense. these are probably all poor analogies, the way that I'm talking about death. But yeah, that's my belief that when you die, that's the absolute end of it. Now, I'm somebody who's thought a lot about these things. I've got my own channel. I've listened to countless arguments. I've been kind of asking questions about these matters probably since I was a child in a way that probably the majority of people don't bother. I've been through various, I don't know, I suppose I've been through various religious and spiritual, what you might call spiritual phases. I've been into Buddhism, I've been into Zen, I've been out to India, and I've actually visited ashrams. And so I've done things that a lot of people probably wouldn't do. I've been involved in, I don't know, alternative ways of looking at reality, and um, I've been involved with sort of alternative health and various therapies, and I don't know, all sorts of things. But I reached a kind of conclusion somewhere around the turn of the millennium that um, there's nothing beyond the material world that manifests before us. There is absolutely nothing at all. There is only the material world. That's not to say that I'm a philosophical naturalist, philosophical materialist, because I'm not certain that this is the case. But it seems to me that all we've got is the natural world that we were born into, and I've got no reason to believe that there's anything else. Okay, so let me just move on to what happened in the last 2 weeks. Now, my parents are both over 80 years old. My father is nearly 85. My mother is 81. They live apart. They divorced in 1978. And my mother's in good health. And my father's kind of been in good health. So my father remarried in 1978, by the way. Sorry, not 1978. That was the year that, that was the year of the divorce. He remarried in 1981, somebody that he met in 1978. And he's been with her all this time, right? So he's been with her. I met her in 1978 when I was 14 years old. And it's not an easy thing for, uh, it wasn't an easy thing for me as a son to accept a stepmother into my life at 14 years old. I mean, it's not an easy thing for anybody in that kind of situation. Nevertheless, uh, they have been together since 1978 until this year. You don't live forever. Relationships don't last forever. Sooner or later, no matter how long you live together, sooner or later you'll be separated, unless you do a joint suicide pact and die at the same time, or unless by some miracle or coincidence you both fall dead at exactly the same moment. Sooner or later, one of you is going to be left alone, right? That happens all the time. It's incredibly common. There are people, I mean, obviously, I believe over 50% of marriages end in divorce, but a lot of people stay together their whole lives. Once they meet, they stay together 40, 50, 60 years. It's not really that uncommon. But sooner or later, one of them's going to be bereaved by the other. That is just bound to happen. And then it's a case of how they deal with it. So with my stepmother, I mean, I wouldn't say that I was close to her. We've been on more or less good terms all those years. We've kind of had our ups and downs now and again, but more or less we've been on sort of good terms, goodish terms, I would say, not always fantastic terms. And I found out 3 years ago that she had cancer. Now, I always assumed that my dad would die first. The reason for that, A, is he's older by 3 years. Secondly, he smoked until about the age of 60. Thirdly, he consumed a heck of a lot of alcohol. He's been drinking for like the last 40 years, as far as I know, and maybe even longer than that. So, and his diet. He, I mean, he likes quite sort of fatty food and all that kind of thing. So I wouldn't really say He's had a fantastically healthy diet. So for all these reasons, I always assumed that my father would die first. And also because my stepmother's parents, her mother lived to be 99 and her father lived to be 95. So naturally, I presume that she would also live to be about 100. She doesn't smoke. She's got an active lifestyle. She gets out and plays golf with her lady friends. She's got friends, good support network, and she gets exercise. And my dad really never exercised. He just more or less stays in the house, and I mean he doesn't really do that much in terms of exercising. So for all these reasons, it was a great surprise to me, really, that he outlasted her. Well, he's a bit of a stubborn old man, to be honest, so it shouldn't really surprise me that much. I shouldn't have been too surprised, therefore, that she died on August the 29th after a long, very, very painful and difficult battle with cancer. I didn't know how difficult and painful it was because I was being kept in the dark. And I have to give her credit. She she faced her illness with incredible courage, and I've got a lot of respect and admiration for her, the way that she faced it. I don't think I could have faced it like that. I think I would have taken assisted dying. I would have got out much sooner. I mean, based on what I've heard about how she suffered, I don't think I would have wanted it to get to that stage. Of course, there's no assisted dying in the UK. I would have had to go overseas to Holland or Switzerland to do it. But if I ever get cancer and it's going to be anything like that, I would want to end my life and not finish my life off uh, in the way that she did. So this is going to sound strange, but I only found out that she died because I did a search on the internet. One of the great things about the internet is that if you're wondering if somebody's died, you can you can find out online. You only have to type somebody's name into the internet and where they live. And if they've got a slightly unusual name, as my stepmother did have because of my surname, then when I saw her name appear, I realized straight away, oh, my stepmother's died on August the 29th, and I'm finding this out in October. Why wasn't I informed? Well, I don't know. That's really strange. I've got a brother and sister who I'm sort of in touch with, and I'm really surprised that I wasn't informed. But better late than never, I suppose. I don't know why they didn't inform me, but that's another issue. I know she wasn't my mother, but I've known her since 1978, and obviously she's been with my father all these years. But okay, let's just move on. Of course, when I heard that she died, the first thing I thought about was how's this affected my father? Now, just going back to her, just very briefly, when I met her in 1978, 79, I think in 1979, I asked her about religion. What's her religious beliefs? And she said to me, she's got no religious affiliation. She doesn't believe in God. And she's an atheist, effectively. I was an atheist then as well. So, that was fine. We didn't really have anything more to talk about that. And however, in 1982, she had a child with my father. And a year after that, she converted to Christianity. Yeah, surprise, surprise. What a coincidence. I was very surprised that she converted to Christianity. And at the time, I remember asking her, you were adamant. You told me there's no God and you were an atheist. What made you change your mind? And she said to me, well, after she had her child, she felt this overwhelming love one night. She felt this sort of all encompassing universal love for the whole of mankind and existence. And then she just knew that there was a God. And as convenience would have it, there's a church down the road. Yeah, a Christian church. And it was all laid out for her. I mean, it's interesting that she decided there was a God. And then she didn't think, well, which God? No. It was convenient just to go to the local church and praise Jesus. Okay, so she converted to Christianity. I mean, not in any big sort of pompous way, but she was a Christian. This was at a time when I was getting into Buddhism, by the way, and she was interested in what I had to say about. No, no, sorry, it wasn't at a time when I was getting into Buddhism. Let's get the chronology right. About 15 years later, in the 90s, when I was getting into Buddhism, she wanted to know. Well, a really bizarre question she asked me: what do Buddhists have to say about Jesus? Is Jesus the Son of God? Which I thought, and I still think it's a hilarious question, and it just shows that she knows absolutely nothing about Buddhism whatsoever. No, she didn't really like what I had to say about Christianity. She didn't like it at all, and I think we agreed really not to talk about religion because we just had different beliefs. So fast forward to literally just fairly recently. Yeah, I knew that she had cancer, but I understood she'd had successful surgery. She'd done chemotherapy, but then I kept hearing that she was on some new drug or new chemotherapy or something. And I was kind of in touch with her. She wished me happy birthday last year. And I don't know, I didn't, it's just a big shock. It all happened. Yep, she died. And I contacted my father, uh, and he was in quite a state. Obviously, he really was in quite a state. And I said that I would come and spend a week with him. I haven't seen him for ages. And I thought, I've got to go and support him. I've got to go and help him out. I've been in touch with my brother and sister about him. How's he coping with it? Well, not well, apparently. For 6 months, in fact, before she died, he's been going through a quite difficult process, drinking a lot, and generally being quite a difficult person about things. And of course, then it all happened. The death happened. He didn't go to the funeral. He couldn't drag himself out of the house. So I decided to go down. I went down, when was it? Last Monday. I drove down. I live a long way away. I live 300 miles away. So I took a week off. Well, rather, I took my work with me because I can kind of work off my laptop. And that was handy that I could just get in my car, drove straight down to him, got there on Monday evening. And I was shocked at what a bad state he was in. I mean, physically and everything. Okay, 84 and a half years old is not young. You expect people to look old. But he was in an absolute shocking state. And I can't go into visually what I saw, but suffice to say that once it took him 10 minutes to get off the sofa and come and open the door. And I mean, he didn't just walk to the door. I mean, he staggered. He staggered to the door. It first took him about 2 minutes to get up off the sofa. And then it took him about another, I don't know, 5 minutes eventually. I don't know why it took him so long. Eventually, he got to the door. He opened it up, and he was in a heck of a state. I could smell alcohol in his breath. And he just looked at me and said, "Thank God you're here." Okay, well, I know that he's not a Christian. I know that he's not. He doesn't believe in God. In fact, I had this conversation with him. Yeah, once I'd sorted him out, once I'd made sure he was fully dressed, um, I sat him down. In the meantime, he actually fell over when I was doing something, putting my coat away. He actually fell over. This is something that has been happening to him. I think due to the drinking, he loses his balance, and with him being old, when he falls over, his he's injured his arm, and he actually had blood all over his arm. The older you get, the easier the skin breaks, and if you fall over, it doesn't take much to actually break the skin. Yeah, so he was in an absolute shocking state. I eventually managed to calm him down, spend time with him, and I don't think I did such a bad job with him over that time. He needed somebody to talk to and do a lot of talking, express how he's feeling, etc. We talked over a lot about old times, and I tried to sort of divert his attention from his loss and talk about old times when I was a child and good times throughout his marriage. And he wanted to stay up talking late, very, very late. I remember one night I tried to go to bed at 12:30, and he said, "Oh, can't you stay up? I'd like to keep talking." And yeah, so I was there for him, as I think any son would be. for a father in that kind of condition. But I've lived a fairly blessed life in the sense that I've never lost anybody in my life to death. And I still regard that as being true because my stepmother was my stepmother. She's not my mother. And I'm sorry that she died, particularly as my father has taken her loss so horribly. But losing a stepmother is not the same as losing a mother. So I still don't consider that anybody in my life has actually died on me. Okay, one or two friends who have lost touch with, I found out they died young. I felt sad, but I've never really personally experienced the grief of losing somebody who's died in my life. I never have. My grandparents don't really count because, um, I mean, it was like years before I discovered that my grandmother died, and various other reasons. I didn't cry any tears when my grandparents died. Maybe I should have done, but I sort of wasn't around them and wasn't really part of their life at the time. So I've got my close family members. My mother and father are alive. My brother, my sister. I've got a half brother and a half sister. They're all fine, and they're like my core family. Okay, I've got an ex-wife. Yeah, and of course I've got a son. All right. So they're my sort of core family. That if any one of those died, then I'm going to experience family. That if any one of those died, then I'm going to experience the grief that he was experiencing. So I've lived. I'm 60 years old, and I've still not experienced anybody dying on me. Surely, sooner or later. I'm not wishing it to happen. I know it will happen. Maybe I'm the one that will die before all them, and then they'll be grieving me. Okay, so I've also not experienced anybody bereaved. That is a new experience, and that has been a new experience for me with my father, watching him go through that process. And I did ask him during the week, do you have any? I've never known you to have any religious beliefs. Has that changed? Because I thought that, quite often you hear about people who've lost somebody, and then they might not have had much of a belief in God, and then maybe it would give them some comfort if they believe that the person who they've lost was actually going somewhere where they could see them again. And we know that this happens. People do rediscover religion or come back to religion late in life for that very purpose. But to his credit, he said nope, he doesn't believe in anything at all. So yeah, and neither did she. She didn't recant on her deathbed from because I said, did your wife did she change her mind? Because the last I spoke to her, she 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 went back to not believing in her 70s. I think I missed that part of the story. Yeah, so she'd already deconverted. When she was in her mid 70s, I met her and she said, "No, I don't believe anymore." Um, and I said, "Well, what about all that? You felt all this love and everything." She said, "Well, that's just how I was feeling at the time." And no, but she doesn't believe in any God. It may be something to do with the fact that her son, who she gave birth to, grew up a hard-nosed atheist, just like me. And in fact, I stayed in his room. He's now in his 40s. I stayed in his room while he was away, and I looked at his bookcase. He's got books there by Bertrand Russell, and he's also got this book, which I asked him if I could borrow it. I'm sure a lot of you have read that. God is Not Great. I should have read it. I haven't read it. I asked him, "Can I borrow that from you?" He said, "Yeah, fine." So, excuse me. So I'm going to read that book, God is Not Great. I've never read any Hitchens, actually. I've listened to him, of course, debates, etc., but I've never read any Hitchens. But the fact that her son grew up such a hardline atheist, maybe that had something to do with her. Maybe he convinced her that, in fact, God is highly unlikely to exist. Now I'm in touch with him. This is a question that when things have settled down a bit, I may well ask him, did you have anything to do with your mother's deconversion? That would be actually be quite interesting, because it's very rare. I know that with Matt Dillahunty, for example, there's no way that he could deconvert his parents. They're just so deep. They're just so deeply religious. From what he said on the line, there's very little chance of that happening. So yeah, yeah. So there we are. I had quite a. Actually, it was quite a good week in the sense that I've not seen my father in a long time, and yeah, I did have to scrape him off the floor a few times. The biggest problem he's got is with alcohol, because his only walk that he takes during the day is to the local shop, which is 5 minutes walk away, and they've got it all in there. They've got all the beers, and unfortunately, they also sell vodka. So he's got this vodka problem. He drinks beer, typically. Well, what does he drink? 600 ml times three 600 ml bottles times three is what? Nearly 2 liters of beer a day. I suppose that's quite a bit, but I had some of that beer and it seemed quite sort of tame compared to some beers that I've had. But the more serious thing is, he claimed that he'd stopped buying vodka, and I went to that shop. Say, look, I went out on Thursday afternoon, and in the evening, sorry, on Friday, I went to the shop. I went into that shop and I said, did my father come in yesterday and buy anything? And they said yes. I said, what did he buy? What did he buy? And they said he bought a bottle of vodka. And they showed me the vodka that he bought. It's a brand called Chekhov. Very Russian, eh? Yeah, it's made in France. If he's going to drink vodka, he should drink Stalichnaya. It's probably the best Russian vodka, and it's got a higher degree of purity. But anyway, look, I'm no expert. I'm no expert when it comes to alcohol. So yeah, he's lying about what he's drinking, and I guess he needs it to get himself through the day. I left him, however, in a much better state than when I found him, and I've been in touch with him since I returned. He seems to be much better, and I'm hoping that if he can at least get the alcohol consumption down, he'll have a good chance of, I don't know, rebuilding his life somehow. The problem is he's got no interests. He's got no hobbies. He's got no friends. His whole life was built on that marriage. And now that that's gone, he's obviously flailing around and wondering what to do with himself. Just to say one more thing about him that you might find interesting. So he's actually Hungarian. And the one interesting thing about him, objectively, is because there's nothing else interesting about my father in terms of, I mean, he wasn't an ambitious man. And I mean, he enjoyed cooking. I mean, he's really good at that, but he's probably not good at anything else. The only interesting thing about him, frankly, is that he came out of Hungary in 1956. He was one that is got over the border before the Soviet troops came in and closed the borders. He went out with 200,000 others, and I've heard many stories from him about that, including that apparently he was captured by Soviet troops, put into a ditch with some other young Hungarians who were trying to get out, and they were going to be executed. Fortunately, the commanding officer came and saved them from that because, well, I don't know why, but anyway, he lived to tell the tale, and he got out. And it's quite sort of ironic. People will sometimes say, what would you do if you could go back in time and kill Hitler? If I was asked that question, I would say I would just leave him as he is, because if Hitler hadn't existed, I wouldn't exist. If there hadn't been Hitler, there would have been no Second World War. There would have been no Soviet-controlled communist government in Hungary. There would have been no uprising in 1956. My father wouldn't have left Hungary. He wouldn't have met my mother in England, and I never would have been born. So no, if I went back in time, I definitely would not be killing Hitler. I would just be letting him go on, and that I would just leave it alone. But of course, if you went back in time and did such a major thing, there'd be millions of people that wouldn't exist now. The world would look completely different. Okay, so I think enough of that, really. That's just some of the backstory. I did put up a post last week explaining why I wasn't around, helping out my father. I'm going to be going down to see him once a month and spending 5 days there, just to sort of, I don't know, give him something to look forward to, because it must be difficult living on your own all the time. He's got one or two people looking in on him, but obviously his whole reason for living has been taken away from him. But I've tried to convince him he's got other reasons for living, that he doesn't want to check out just yet, does he? He said, no, no, he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to die. He says he doesn't. He said he wants to live and live. And he says he never wants to die. And of course, I said, well, stop drinking vodka then, because your liver won't last forever. So, okay, let's move on from personal matters and let's talk about the line. Let's talk about some of the calls that came in on the show that went out on Sunday night. There were some sort of amusing calls. I've actually reacted to one of them already, and it was Billy's call. Do any of you guys remember Billy? He used to call in, Billy from Texas. He used to call in, I don't know, 15 odd years ago. He spoke to various hosts, and he's into intelligent design and creationism. And I just wondered whether he never really made much sense when he called in those days. And when I heard his voice, I wondered whether he would be any improvement. And he wasn't really. So he was calling in to say that um, trees are not the product of nature. Yeah. So I understand where he's coming from. I absolutely understand where he's coming from a creationist worldview. Of course, trees are not part of nature. I'm not part of nature. Snails are not part of nature. Nothing, no organic life is part of nature. I absolutely understand where he's coming from when he says that, because during the show, he actually also said that when asked by Matt, well, what is part of nature? Give me an example. And he said, well, rocks, planets, so things like that, which don't have a genome, right? So this is his big thing, that anything that has got a genome, a genetic code, must have been designed, and hence is not naturally occurring. Rocks and planets are naturally occurring, but the genome and life in general is not. It's not natural because God designed it. Now, I found this sort of interesting because, generally speaking, I think creationists would say that God created the world as laid down in the Bible. God created, as far as I know, well, as far as I've interpreted creationism, God created more or less everything. So God created not only organic life, but God also created rocks, stones, grains of sand, soil, absolutely everything, all the molecules, all the atoms, quarks, absolutely everything in the universe God created. So what Billy's saying is that no, God didn't create those things. This is bizarre. God didn't create those things. God only created life. That the planets and everything else God didn't create. So this is sort of new to me. I always thought that according to creationism, God created everything. But Billy's saying no. Rocks are not. Sorry, rocks are natural. Planets are natural, but life is not. Life was created, and of course, this was something that I hadn't heard him say before, and he asserted that. Well, he said to Matt, "You can't demonstrate that um, trees are from the natural world, or that you can't demonstrate that the genome is purely naturalistic, that it occurred in nature. You can't demonstrate that." This is a bit strange because in science tells us that there is nature. Everything around us, everything around us is nature, more or less. Of course, I say more or less because I'm excluding a lot of man-made products. You can't say that a car is part of nature. Yes, a car is made up of things that we find in nature, but the car itself doesn't occur naturally. We know that cars are designed. We know that human beings make cars. Every single example of a car we've ever encountered, we can prove that was made by a human being. We can go back and find the blueprints. We can say which factory it was made in, etc. So we've got a good justification for saying that a car was designed. And really, this is Billy is sort of appealing to the watchmaker argument in a way, but the departure is that for a creationist, you find a watch on a beach and you say, "Oh, this is designed," right? But in the worldview of a creationist, everything is designed. So you can't pick up a watch and say, "Oh, well, this is designed," because you need something which is not designed to hold it up against. And you can't do that because in a creationist worldview, even grains of sand are designed. So when you go onto a beach and you find a watch, you're walking onto a beach, metaphorically speaking, full of watches. Imagine every single grain of sand is a watch. It's the same thing. If if a watch is designed and you're saying that it's got hallmarks of design, then a grain of sand too, in a way, has also got hallmarks of design to a creationist, because God created everything, every last grain of sand, every last atom is designed by God. And if you look at an atom, it's got structure to it, hasn't it? It's got a structure to it. So you could say, yeah, there's a structure there. There's the appearance of design. The form demonstrates that it was designed, or at least it looks like it was designed. So yeah, everything in existence is designed in the creationist worldview. And yet for Billy, only the genome looks like a code, so it must have a coder. Now, I don't think that the human genome is anything like a computer programming language. It's something which is really, really very, very different. I believe it's more like a sort of blueprint of the individual, which has evolved and become very complex. So the biggest problem for creationists, and I'm not saying absolutely that there is no divine designer. I'm not saying that. But as far as we know, the genome occurred naturally, that at some point in the long distant past, life started from very, very simple beginnings, and a self-replicating molecule somehow got going. We don't know how, and that everything started from there over hundreds of millions of years. It took a long, long time for this to happen. Now, there was another caller. Of course, that eventually Billy was backed into a corner by Matt, and Matt said, demonstrate that a tree could not have occurred naturally, demonstrate that the genome could not have occurred naturally. And Billy stumbled a bit and he said, well, yeah, we've got simulations which have failed to do it. Okay, so there are simulations which may well have been set up to try and replicate the way that sort of chemistry behaves and biology, and try to replicate how maybe abiogenesis happened and the whole thing got going. And maybe there have been simulations which have failed to do that. But that doesn't mean to say that there isn't a simulation that one day might be successful in doing that. But it doesn't really matter, does it? It doesn't really matter if no simulation is ever found that can do that and demonstrate something in relation to that, because this event that took place, or maybe there was more than one event in the past, happened at a unique point in the development of the universe, and we don't know exactly what the conditions were in those times. So we've got really no chance of actually replicating those conditions to say how it actually happened, and to rule out that to say that it couldn't have happened naturally. That's the whole problem. That's the problem with creationism. You can't rule out that it could have happened naturally. And you're going to have a heck of a job ruling in that it happened by divine power. So that was Billy. Yeah, okay. So let's have a look at some of the other calls that came in. You know something? Okay, I'm from Britain. I'm British. I'm English. It's embarrassing. It shouldn't be embarrassing, but it's kind of embarrassing that whenever a Brit calls in to the line, the call is so mind-numbingly stupid that it's embarrassing that people are calling in from the nation that produced, I don't know, Isaac Newton, David Hume, Bertrand Russell, Shakespeare, and all these great figures. And we've got such idiots calling in to the line that it wouldn't surprise me if there are a lot of viewers out there to the line thinking that in Britain we've got absolutely no brains whatsoever if we're going to go on those who are calling into the line. Let me just take a breather on this. Let me have a look through some of your comments. I just need a quick breather just for my throat. Excuse me. Let's have a look. Paul Camish, married 35 years. Congratulations, Paul. Well done for, you must be married to an amazing woman to have lasted that long. Well done. Warp speed 5, Mr. Chekhov. Yeah, I think it's, I mean, fancy a French company manufacturing vodka and then calling it Chekhov. I mean, well, why not? He was one of my favorite characters in Star Trek, so why not? Let's see. Well, yeah, Lee Jam. The thing about Mark Twain is he said that, yeah, so not being alive for 1 billion years before he was born wasn't a big deal for him, and it won't be a big deal afterwards. The only problem with that I've got is that the billion years before he was born, he had no existence before that, and he had no consciousness that was invested in wanting to stay alive, and indeed in awareness and existence itself. So the issue is that we're alive, we've got the instinct to live, and we're invested in existence. So it's the contemplation of the next billion years not existing that seems to be the problem. No matter how you try to spin it, it's not the best of prospects, really. And it would be nice of me to say, oh, I've got no problem with death. No, I don't mind at all. You know, I mean, it's just like before I was born, trillions of years, I had no problem then, and it won't be a problem in the future. Well, you could say that, but if I took a trip to Iran and I said the wrong thing and I had the barrel of a gun put against my forehead, I probably wouldn't really quite have those sentiments, would I? I would probably be begging for my life and converting to Islam. Okay, right. Yeah, I need a new watch. Where's this beach? Well, I'll show you where the beach is. There's just one problem. All the watches are just cheap China rubbish. So I don't really think you'll find a good watch there. Designed very cheaply. Yeah, Paul Camish. Yeah, well done. 1914. I'm actually in the watch business, by the way. Oddly enough, I won't say exactly what I do. I don't actually sell watches. I do something in relation to watches. But yeah, that's pretty good then. If you've got a watch dated 1914, it keeps perfect time. Yeah, they were making great mechanical watches in those days, and that's really good. Okay. Hi, Wesley Curry. Welcome. Okay, so what was I talking about? Oh, yes, this UK caller. He called in. This UK caller phoned in about the Nativity, sometimes people call in, and I think they almost just want to hear themselves. They're recording themselves on the line, and they just want to hear themselves talk, because this guy phoned in with really absolutely nothing of any interest. So he was phoning in to say that, is it a problem that we've got at Christmas the nativity performances in schools in Britain? Is that something that we should really be concerned about? And well, we have done. It's in the culture, and it still happens. There's a nativity. There's usually a nativity scene in schools, and I suppose it's a Christian thing, and it shouldn't really be there unless it's a faith school. Nativity scenes really should be restricted to the churches. So, as an atheist, I'm not really terribly happy about it personally. I don't really have too much of a problem, because the nativity scene is something which we've had in our culture, and a lot of the sort of imagery that we see is actually connect on Christmas cards is connected with the nativity. And I suppose there's one good thing about it, is that it teaches children the story and the meaning of the nativity and where that imagery comes from. So yeah, and then Matt seemed to be confused. He said, "Oh, what do you mean by the nativity? Do you mean pictures of it, or do you mean a performance?" And I mean, maybe in America you don't have this so much, but in most schools you will find there will be a nativity play performance. So yeah, and of course there'll be Christmas songs, etc., which a lot of them, or most of them even, are very, very Christian. And this led on to a discussion about the fact that America has a superior system because you've got separation of church and state. And then the caller said, "Well, yeah, but we're much more secular." The caller said, "Well, yeah, but we're much more secular in the UK." Well, that was a good point that he made, and that does seem to be true. There's not so much fanaticism in Britain, it seems, in Christianity at least, compared with America. And okay, okay, look. So we've got a constitutional monarchy in Great Britain, and the monarch really, in all reality, is symbolic. Look, in the 17th century, Oliver Cromwell was able to mobilize Parliament and chop the head of a monarch off. Yeah, so Parliament is supreme. Technically speaking, you could say that um, the monarch's consent has got to be sought, but this is just a convention, and it's Her Majesty's government, it's His Majesty's government. So you could argue, well, the government is acting on behalf of the king. Yeah, I know that, and the king is the head of the Church of England. The king can't be a Catholic. That's the king can't be a Catholic. That's absolutely true. And you know something? The only person, this is ironic, the only person in the UK for which there is no absolute freedom of religion is the king. That's the funny thing. That allows Matt Dillahunty to say, "You in Great Britain, you haven't got absolute freedom of religion." Yeah, because the king can't be a Catholic, can't be anything else other than head of the Church of England. That is absolutely that is a fact. Yes, but Matt Dillahunty did get one thing wrong when he said that the king can't marry a Catholic. That's not true. There was an act of parliament, I think 10 or 15 years ago, and the king can now marry somebody of any denomination. That has been changed. It used to be true, it's not true anymore. But we haven't got absolute separation of church and state. But in reality, religion really plays no part in lawmaking, and that's what it's all about. And ironically, even though in America you've got separation of church and state, religion does seem to be a bigger problem in lawmaking. There are people who try to push through a religious agenda at state level, at least, and at national level. We've seen with the Roe v. Wade overturning that there's now no automatic, in many states, I think, no automatic right to abortion. For women, they're having to travel to other states to have an abortion. So it seems to be a bigger problem, this thing, even though the founding fathers wrote a very good constitution. Well, bravo for that. But there seems to be a bigger problem with religion in America than there is in Britain, even though we've got this bizarre sort of archaic constitutional monarchy where the head of the government, the head of the country is also head of the Christian church. Now, I also did some reading, and I found that the head of the country is also head of the Christian church. Now, I also did some reading, and I found that it seems that Christianity is like, you could call it like the state religion of England, but it isn't of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales. It only applies to England. Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales don't have a state religion. Okay, I'm living in Scotland, so the poor English, that's their state religion. Their state religion is Christianity, but I'm in Scotland, so I'm okay. I'm not in a country where there's a state religion. But I mean, I had no problem living in England all those years, having the state religion, Christianity. There's no compulsion to be a Christian. So to all intents and purposes, it doesn't really matter that there's no separation of church and state in the UK, or rather that it's not absolute, because in a practical sense, it really seems to make no difference. But Matt Dillahunty tends to make a big thing about it and say, "Oh, we've got separation of church and state, and you haven't." Well, okay. I mean, if you want to make some big point about that, you can do. But it's the same is also true of many European states that have retained a monarchy. And it's not just in Britain that that's the case, but we've kept it as a kind of innocuous, sort of harmless, symbolic thing, which doesn't really seem to make a big deal of difference to anybody, at least in a religious sense. You can be any religion you want in this country, and that's all that really matters. And religion is not a big deal in politics. Nobody's interested in what you believe in politics. If you say you're an atheist, nobody's going to vote against you because you're an atheist. They're more interested in which party you're in, what your policies are, etc. So I don't know. I don't think that. I think that Matt Dillahunty needs to acknowledge that, and I think he did kind of acknowledge that maybe religion is a bigger problem in America because you have got that separation of church and state. That religious groups work a lot more to exert influence in various ways. So there we are. That was the first call. I didn't really like that caller. I don't know. It just sounded to me like he just came on to hear himself speak, really. Okay, let's see who else called in. Let's have a look. Oh yeah, Scott called in to say, could society have been successful without religion? Well, I suppose that presumes that we've got a successful society. But okay, let's presume that we have got a successful society and ask whether we could have still got here without religion. That's a difficult one. That is a difficult one, really, because I suppose that all the successful societies in the first world, let's say, have all had religion behind them at some point for a heck of a long time, and we haven't got any first world nations that didn't have probably Christianity behind them. But you could look at the Islamic countries and say, well, they've had Islam for 1,500 years, and what good has it done them? And I reviewed a book, I don't know, a year ago, a book entitled What Went Wrong, which is all about how the Islamic world at some point in the past was ahead of the Christian world, and how eventually the Christian powers reigned supreme in every metric that matters, in human rights, in science, in philosophy, mathematics, etc. art, music. We're way ahead, we're streets ahead, and we still are of those nations. And the economically, of course, as well. Yes, I know that the Arabs have got a lot of Muslim countries have got oil, and frankly, if they didn't have oil, they'd just be riding camels around and sort of living nomadic lifestyles. Or, I mean, they have nothing much more to show in their economies than sort of dates and figs, and uh, they wouldn't they wouldn't really have much at all. And they didn't actually have proper timekeeping. They were using water timekeepers until they started importing Western-made watches. They've had an absolutely abysmal record. This is an example where I suppose you could say it's maybe the question should have been, could society have been successful without Christianity? I'm in danger of giving Christianity credit here because it seems that Islam in particular has been very, very successful in retarding the progress of those nations, the Middle Eastern countries, the African countries which are Islamic, are all in absolutely abysmal shape in every way that you can think of. Human rights in particular, it's an absolute nightmare. So Christianity somehow has worked better than Islam. We've seen countries that are Christian countries do better. Now, is that because of Christianity, or is that despite Christianity, or maybe because Christianity didn't have those features about it that Islam has had? And what is it about Islam that meant those nations have done so appallingly badly? Well, I think one of the things is complacency. That if you believe that you've got the absolute truth, and that outside the infidel doesn't know anything, and you've got nothing to learn from the infidel, which actually in Turkey and other Islamic countries was the state of affairs for hundreds of years, even when Western powers were leaping ahead with inventing gunpowder and cannons and guns, etc., when the Turks were still using bows and arrows and spears and swords, and then obviously being defeated. Even then, those Islamic countries only wanted to take knowledge from themselves. They were not prepared to learn from others. So maybe one of the good features of Christianity is that it's been more open to learning beneficial things from other cultures. Or maybe, I don't know. But it's sort of quite an interesting question. And I don't really think that Matt and Eric really touched on that. The fact that, maybe I missed it, that different religions have had different outcomes. Islam has an extremely poor outcome for the nations that have adopted it, and Christianity has had a somewhat better outcome. But one has to say that the most of the progress that we've seen, say in the last 400 years in the Western world, in the Christian Western world, came about when there was a lot more skepticism, when religious institutions' power was being reduced all the time. Then there was more and more progress in the Industrial Revolution, in the age of the Enlightenment. We saw that religion had less of a stranglehold on, for example, the educational institutions, and there were more secular subjects, more scientific subjects being taught. A lot of the sort of scholastic philosophy and theology was shoved to one side, and a lot more science and mathematics was being taught, partly because it was seen that we could get ahead economically if we had people with these skills. So, and that's something that the Muslims didn't do. They were just relying on Allah. Allah will make it all good. Allah will destroy the infidel. We don't have to do anything. everything will be right with us. Okay, just moving on. I noticed that Andrew Wilson trolls, they've appeared on my channel. Do you remember that Matt Dillahunty was supposed to have a debate with Andrew Wilson? There was some big issue with, I don't know, some problem with transgenderism. And Matt Dillahunty took exception to something that Andrew Wilson said. There wasn't a debate. And I've had people on my channel saying, oh, what do you think of Andrew Wilson? Why did Matt Dillahunty run away, etc., etc.? And there seem to be calls coming into the line quite often about this. And usually people come on and saying, why did you run away from Andrew Wilson? Somebody came on saying, oh, I want to debate you because you didn't debate Andrew Wilson. I want to debate you, Matt Dillahunty. This is laughable. I mean, look, Matt Dillahunty, that's not how you challenge Matt Dillahunty to a debate. Look, let's supposing I was a Christian and I thought I could defeat Matt Dillahunty in a debate. The way that I would do it is I would say, look, I would write to Matt Dillahunty, and the first thing I would do is donate $100 as a matter of good faith to show that I'm serious, because people that aren't prepared to put their money down are not serious. I'm afraid that's true. It's always been true. And debating is a business. It's a business model. We all know it. People make money out of debating. There's a fee-paying audience, and those on the platform are paid. It's a business. It's an industry. And if I wanted to debate Matt Dillahunty, I would email him, send him $100. I would say, look, I know who you are. I've got the arguments to defeat you in a debate, and I'm willing to pay your fee. What is your fee to do, say, I don't know, a 3-hour debate with me, stream live on, I don't know, Pangburn or some channel? And then Matt would say, okay, let's set it up through Pangburn. Then get back in touch with Pangburn, say, yeah. And by the way, send Pangburn $100 as well, just to show I'm serious. And ask how much money it's going to cost. Okay, it might be $5,000, it might be $10,000. I don't know. I don't know how much these things cost, but money can make virtually anything happen in the debating world. Absolutely, it can. If I had a couple of million to spare and I was completely and utterly insane, I might contact Jordan Peterson and say Matt Dillahunty and get them on the stage here. Yeah, money can make virtually anything happen in the debating world. Of course it can. So you don't just come on to the line and say, Matt Dillahunty, I want to debate you. Of course, Matt said the right thing. Yep, we can do it. Just you'll have to sort out the venue, etc., and do all the hard work. It can, if you get in touch with my people, we can talk. And then this person says, well, you wouldn't debate Andrew Wilson. And Matt said, what's the topic going to be for our debate? And they said, oh, transgenderism. Well, I don't really think Matt Dillahunty is interested in debating transgenderism for somebody who wants to take Andrew Wilson's place. So obviously that went nowhere at all. Okay, just moving on. Somebody else called in to say that he's a theist who sort of goes away from religion and then comes back to it mainly through music, mainly through church, choral music, etc. And he says that this type of music seems to have something a bit extra compared with other types of music. And sort of, I don't know, brings a spiritual out in him and makes him think that there's a God and everything. I mean, speaking for myself, I'm an atheist. I enjoy choral music. I enjoy like requiems and, big masses, Bach and all that sort of thing. And I understand what they're about. I understand the Christian side to it. And I absolutely adore some of those pieces. And I don't get it. I don't get what he's saying, because there's other music, secular music, that makes me feel a similar way. But obviously, music is a very subjective thing, and it affects different people in different ways. It may be that if he's thinking, oh, I want to believe in Jesus, I want to believe in God, that when he listens to these pieces, there's some expectation in him, and that makes him feel in a particular way. I don't know, it's possible. So Matt started off the line saying he didn't want any esoteric gods. I'm fed up with esoteric gods as well. I get really fed up with people coming onto my channel and saying that everything is God. Are you still an atheist? And I say, well, if everything's God and you're calling that God, then no, by that God, I'm not an atheist. No, I don't get involved with those silly conversations. I'm with Matt on this, that the only God I'm really interested in terms of debating, I'm not interested in sort of non-detectable gods that don't interfere with reality. Sure, such a God may be the God that exists, but I suppose it's not really worth talking much about such a God if one can never really justifiably believe in it. So it's much more interesting to talk about gods that interfere with reality, that you can pray to, that provide an afterlife, that have supposedly appeared on earth and have got sort of written scriptures behind them. Those gods are a lot more interesting and valid to discuss than these esoteric gods that people seem to invent on a whim almost. So he was talking about Jungian this, Jungian that, and then I think Matt got completely fed up with him at the end when he mentioned quantum mechanics, and that was the end of the call. Somebody will always throw quantum mechanics in there. When the going gets tough, they'll just toss that in, say, oh well, quantum mechanics is showing us that, I don't know, something can be a wave and a particle at the same time. Therefore, somehow you can leap to, you can reason yourself to God from there. Well, no, I don't think so. Okay, what else have we got? Oh yeah, this idea, DeAndre called in and said, oh, that was quite a long call, which made absolutely no progress. It was another creationist call. Somebody called in to say, well, and I've heard this before, you can't make, you say to them, well, why do you believe that God created everything? And they'll say, well, you can't make a tree. Oh dear. How many times have we heard that? You can't make a tree. Therefore, if you can't make a tree, then the only other way that tree could be there is if a God made a tree. Right? Wrong. Well, maybe God did make that tree. Maybe that's true. But the fact that I can't make a tree doesn't mean the only other option is that God must have done it. There are other options. One option is that tree may have occurred naturally by various processes. And that's the obvious one. And that's the one that they kept putting to DeAndre. Half an hour that call went, and they went around in a circle, and they got back to the beginning, and he said, yeah, you can't make a tree, Matt Dillahunty. And then they came back to, why is that? Why does it mean there's a God? Because I can't make a tree. Yeah, so that call ended at that point. I wonder why a lot of creationists can't allow for the possibility that the world may be just that nature may just be, or human beings might be just naturally occurring, that all organic life could be just naturally occurring, and there may not be a God involved. Leave that open as a possibility. Leave it open as a possibility. Why do you have to rule that out and settle on God as the answer to everything? I don't know. I'm not ruling out God. Nature, science seems to inform us that everything occurred naturally. That's what science seems to be telling us. But I can't rule out that God might have kind of done it that way. So I'm prepared to be open to that. But it seems that the evidence points to everything occurring naturally. Okay, let's see. Is there anything else to say? Oh yeah, somebody called in. Brian called in saying this was on another show, the one with Mandis. Oh yeah, this was a bit of a funny one, because Brian said, a demon is manifesting in Matt when he gets angry, and there was they never really defined what a demon is, and Matt said, well, how do you know it's a demon? What evidence have you got that it's a demon? And he said it's because Matt gets angry and he becomes like a demon. And that's it, really. That didn't really go anywhere. Okay, well, that's about it. I think I'm going to wrap this up. If you've got any questions you want to ask me, let me just have a quick look through your comments. Wesley Curry's gone out. He wasn't here long. Wesley just comes in to preach by the looks of it. He doesn't really seem to engage with anybody. Yeah, Lee Jam. Yeah, the abortion issue in the US is insane. I mean, the only problem we've got over here is that those nuts are coming to some abortion clinics and harassing women who are going into the abortion clinics and trying to prevent them from accessing healthcare that they need. So, yeah, I mean, for us in Britain, it's just a healthcare issue, and obviously, abortion happens because there are either medical reasons or because obviously contraception failed or maybe contraception wasn't used. But you can't punish people and force them to have children because they didn't use contraception, which I think is what the religious people want to do. The hardline Christians, they hate to think about people having sex and having a good time. That's really what it's all about. That's what it's all about. And they want to punish mothers. They want to force mothers who've maybe had sex with a male who didn't want to use contraception, and they made a mistake and accepted that, and they got pregnant. And they want to force mothers to have children in those circumstances. And I think that it's a bad circumstance. It really is. And personally, I don't understand why people don't look after their sexual health. In my life, I've always taken precautions, but some people aren't like that. People make mistakes, but you can't force a woman to have a child just because she's made a mistake. It's her body, and it's her right to terminate the pregnancy. And it's not like you can just go into a clinic and say, "Oh, I made a mistake, forgot to take the pill, or whatever, and I'm pregnant. Can you get me abortion? I'd like to book in tomorrow and have the child out of me." It doesn't happen like that. It's actually quite a tough process. I believe first you go to your GP, and then you get referred on, you get counseling, and it's not actually that easy a thing to do. Okay, Matt make a big thing about all sorts of things over the years of watching him. Sorry, this is RSF talking. Ironically, he's become far less tolerant. You know, I was looking at one of the older shows going back to about 2018, before Matt's heart operation, because somebody said that Matt's anger issues started after the heart operation. No, he started this. I mean, he's had an anger issue, I would say, for at least the last 10 years. Yeah, there have been times when he's got angry, and he seems to have become more angry, but he was blowing up on people 5 years ago before his operation. Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to sign off now. Thank you very much anyway for everybody tuning in. And I'm going to be uploading a few videos this week. Hope you'll catch up with them on some of the calls that I've discussed. So bye for now, and I'll see you next time.